My name is Josh Peck, host of Peck Report on Daily Renegade. I used to suffer with chronic pain from a degenerative bone disease. I was hopelessly addicted to opioids without any end in sight. But then, I discovered Kratom and CBD. I am no longer on prescription drugs, and I have more energy and pain relief than ever before. Kratom and CBD have given me my life back without draining my bank account. If you too would like some minor to major pain relief, Kratom and CBD might be for you. Either click on the links in the description below this video or go to dailyrenegade.com on the top left banner or right side ad and check out Tropic Health Kratom and CBD. Use promo code HEALTH20 for 20% off your order and get your life back today. There is a major key to understanding the spiritual war that rages around us. Why do fallen angels, rebellious angels, why do they hate humanity so much? Why do they always want to destroy humanity in every way imaginable? Well, there's a story in the book of Genesis that actually explains all of this, but we tend to miss it because usually we're just looking at the human side. So I'm really excited to get into that, all that and more on today's Peck Report. Hey everybody, hope you are doing well. This is an episode that I've been wanting to do for a while and just haven't really had a chance to do it yet. So I'm really glad that we're going to be talking about this today. There's a lot of passages that help explain things in the Old Testament that's talked about in the New. So, for example, we read in Ephesians 6 how there's this spiritual war around us. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers of darkness, and it's really a spiritual enemy that's discussed there. Well, why is that? And is there an Old Testament precedent for it? Because I like this idea that it's been said that the New Testament is sort of like a commentary on the Old Testament. What Old Testament stories do we have to show the struggle between angels and humans? And what a strange struggle this is. Now, of course, this isn't all angels, because there are a lot of good angels too. We know that there's a lot of angels that serve God. It's also not all humans, because there's a lot of humans that unfortunately serve Satan, and they're on the evil side. But primarily just talking about people who want to serve God, Christians and rebellious angels. What is this war all about? And one of the most exciting things I think to do is discover when there's a story in the Old Testament that alludes to something revealed in the New Testament. So, for example, Ephesians 6, spiritual warfare, these angels, there's at least one story about Jacob and Esau that really helps explain this struggle between angels and man, and I wanted to talk about that today. This is really exciting stuff. If you haven't had a chance to already, to get this full episode, head on over to dailyrenegade.com. Get a membership. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. I suggest getting the $100 a year, because then you get 2 months for free and you don't have to think about it again for a while. So that's always a good thing. It really helps this ministry function and run. We also support a lot of other ministries as well, which are listed at dailyrenegade.com. So if you are being fed by what we're doing here, if this channel is helping you, just know that our full outreach is not on YouTube. It's at dailyrenegade.com. We have a whole community there of believers, which is really great. We fellowship together, and we're inviting you to come be a part of the family as well. So dailyrenegade.com, it helps us keep these videos coming, and it helps try to spread truth in these dark times. So let's talk about Jacob and Esau. This, I have to admit, I didn't come up with this on my own. Actually, the first that I heard about this was a comment my good friend Derek Gilbert made on Skywatch TV 3 or 4 years ago, I think. I started looking into this on my own because he said, if you read the story of Jacob and Esau, you can really see a lot of parallels between, this angelic war against humanity. And I thought that'd be something to look into. That's really interesting. I like that kind of stuff. So for those who are not familiar, this is blueletterbible.org. I really like Blue Letter Bible a lot. Typically, I read from the ESV unless I'm planning on going into the Strongs. Which this, I think we're just going to look at the story. If there is a reason for us to get into the Hebrew, and again, I've said this before, Strong's is not the be-all, end-all of Hebrew interpretation. They'll tell you what the word is, but there's more study that needs to be done. It's not the best source, I should say, but it will get you where you need to go. You just have to not, tie down every bit of your doctrine on it. On the Strong's Concordance, but it's good. So the Strong's Concordance only works with the KJV on blueletterbible.org, and for our purposes today, I want to read from the ESV. Also, I like how the website has this little space here for my video, so that works out pretty well as well. I try to make the text big enough for you to be able to see it and follow along. So when we read this, I want you to think of Jacob as mankind, especially believers in God, followers of God, and Esau as rebellious fallen angels. And then let's see how many parallels that we can come up with here and how this all works. And maybe this even means that Isaac is a picture of God or a picture of Jesus, an example, a metaphor. So we read in Genesis 25:19, these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel and Aramean of Paddan Aram, and the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. Now, put a pause there. Of course, there's a lot of things with these types and shadows that you can't take too strongly. Like, for example, God doesn't have a wife, right? So there are certain things where it's like, okay, we can only take it so far. Now, there are some parallels in some passages between Jesus and the church. I don't think this is what we have here. But so I think that this is just the story, just the story in Genesis of Isaac and Rebekah, but I think it's going to start to bleed into a story about angels and man, or at least it's a type or a shadow of that. And think about that from Jacob's perspective. If this is all correct, Jacob gets to heaven, or he's with the Father after he passes from this earth, and then he finds out his whole life, God has used his whole life to teach the whole world who will believe in the Bible about this struggle between angels and man. And that's kind of a cool thought. There are some pessimists that would say, well, I want to live my own life. I don't want my life to be used like that. But it's not. That's missing what a great honor something like that would be, that your life can be an example of something greater than yourself to help other people. What better calling could there be? So I wonder if God still does that in our lives for other people, and at least on a small scale for our families, for sure. If you raise your kids right, that's how your kids get to learn about God in the first place, is through you. So, of course, your life can serve as an example for them. But let's continue on. And Isaac, this is Genesis 25:21, and Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Now, what might be interesting here, this might be something. There are allegories that you could sort of, I don't want to put too firm of an attachment on this, because this is, I wouldn't say that this is clearly expressed in the Bible, but there are some ways that you can draw parallels between the earth, and the womb. And I've written about this in my book Afterlife with Donna Howell and Allie Anderson Henson. I wrote about how do we know that God is, like a father? Why father and not mother? Now, of course, we as Christians would say, well, because the Bible says, and that's all we need. But if we're trying to explain it to somebody else, like more philosophically, how would we explain that? Well, God the Father, if we're children or creations of God, and we look at the role God plays in our existence, it's more fatherly than motherly. And why is that? Because imagine a baby in the womb, right? A baby in the womb cannot see their father. Sometimes they can hear him, but they don't always really understand what he's saying, because they don't understand human language yet. But they don't understand what he's saying, but they can hear him. They can't see him. He plays more of a role on the outside, almost in another world, outside of the womb. He provides for the child. He provides for the mother and the child. He provides. He is. He's unlike the mother, that if something were to happen to, we as children, the child is completely dependent on the mother and the father providing for the child. Now, in the Old Testament times, and this is why adultery was such a crime, such a horrendous crime back then, because if a father left the mother, that the mother didn't really have a way that she could work and earn money and raise the kids and do everything in the ancient world. It was, many times it was looked at as a death sentence. If a father is going to leave his wife and his children, he's abandoning them basically to death, because it's the father's role to bring in money and to provide. It was a lot harder to do that back then. And back then, the mother, there just isn't enough time in the day to take care of the house, prepare all the meals, feed the kids, and go to work and somehow have the kids taken care of. It was a lot harder. It wasn't the way that it is now. So the father completely provides for the child. Without the father, the child and the mother both die. So when you think of these parallels with God, well, God is like in another world, another reality that's here but not here, right? Just like the womb and the father, outside of the womb, obviously. So there's a parallel there. We hear God's voice sometimes, but we don't fully always comprehend it. It's something, we're a creation of His, but it's different. So you can look at parallels of. So what would be the mother? There's not exactly a mother, because there's not a wife. God doesn't have a wife. But there is what could be looked at as a womb, and that's the earth. That's earth. And we're here developing until we go on to the next life, until we're born again, and of course that happens here. We accept Christ, we're born again in the Spirit. So, but what were we made from? We were made from the earth. So it's kind of this really beautiful picture that I believe that God created man and woman and child, and the whole reproductive process is the way it is. I think it's a big example to show how God created us and our relationship with Him. So there's parallels there. Well, now consider that with this story, because this is really interesting. So don't think of Rebecca as, say, the church. A lot of times when, like at some point we'll go through the book of Ruth, and in there you can definitely see like the church is represented by this woman, and then Jesus is represented by Boaz. So you can definitely see that there, but I don't think that's what we have here. I don't believe that Rebecca is the church. I believe that Rebecca, the important part of this story in this story is the womb, and I believe that is a picture of creation, specifically earth, but creation, because read it with that in mind. Okay, so Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife. The Lord granted his prayer. Isaac might be a picture of Jesus, and we know that God created all things through Jesus. So what did God do? Isaac prayed to God, and God granted that prayer and gave Isaac and Rebekah a child. So that's the story here in the physical. At creation, everything was created. God created everything through Jesus, as Scripture says. And how was reality? How was the earth? Before that creation process, how is it described? Void. Without form, void, kind of like empty, nothingness, almost. And what do we see here with Rebekah? Rebekah was barren. There was nothing, right? So in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And what we're going to see here is, in the beginning, Rebekah was barren. There was nothing there. There was no life. There was nothing to sustain life, just like the universe before God created it. Before God created anything, the universe can't just spring into existence. So Rebekah's womb became life-bearing because God decided to honor Isaac's request here. Now, again, you can't take that too far. I don't believe that Jesus prayed to God and God, Jesus is God, right? So you can't take these parallels super literally, but it is kind of this picture of the creation process and what gets created. So in the beginning of Genesis, the heavens and the earth, the domain of angels and God, of course, but the domain of angels and the domain of man. So you got two things. They're both creation, but they're different. They're both creation. God created both, but they're different. So it's just like here, what we're going to see. These two sons, they're both from Isaac, but there's something different here. So let's continue on. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. So what is that struggle? This is the struggle between angels and man, because you got to remember, the womb is this world, right? The womb is a picture of this world. So while they were in the womb, and this would be before this would be during an angelic kind of rebellion, and there's several of these, I believe, because you have the whole Genesis 6 thing. You have there's different examples to look at, but the children struggled within the womb. Well, where's ground zero for the struggle between man and angel, rebellious angels? It's not heaven. In heaven, there's harmony. It's here on earth. The angels, this is the battleground here on earth. So these two children are struggling within Rebekah, just like angels and man. When the angels rebelled, we're only talking about the rebellious angels here. When the angels rebelled, they struggled with man. You have one of these angels, the Nakash, tempting Adam and Eve to eat the fruit. You have another group of angels that come down and mate with humankind in the Genesis 6 narrative, and you have several examples like that. So there's this struggle, and so Rebekah's asking, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening? And remember, too, in Scripture, it says that the earth is like groaning and like just waiting for the day of redemption, waiting for Jesus to put things right. It's groaning. It's almost like Rebekah here. Why is this happening to me? So the Lord said, this is verse 23, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. One shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. Now, this is really interesting. So we could look at this as now, of course, this is speaking of 2 nations in the womb. It is exactly what it says, but I think there's also something more allegorical going on here too. The 2 nations, you have the angelic world, the angelic realm, the kingdom of darkness, let's say, the fallen angels, and then we have God's people. So you got 2 nations. So you have the angels, you have man, 2 people from within you. Well, where are the rebellious angels now? They're not able. They left their habitation, like what Jude says. They left their first habitation, so they're not invited to be, worshiping God at the throne anymore. They left that. So the two peoples from within you, from within Rebekah's womb, are the angels, the fallen angels, and the humans that are here on earth. But it says these shall be divided. There is a division between men and angel, aren't there? They're different. One shall be stronger than the other. Now that line could be taken two ways. In one sense, the angels are stronger than us, as in they can do a lot more than we can do, right? But in another sense, we're stronger than them because we know who God is. We have the authority of Jesus, and we can use the authority of Jesus to exorcise them if need be. And then it says the older shall serve the younger. Who is it that judges the angels? We're told, and it's strange because it's in this passage that talks about Christians not suing each other and bringing each other to court, because Scripture says, don't you know that you will be judging angels? We're the younger, right? Because angels were created before we were. Book of Job talks about how all the angels shouted for joy and sang for joy at the creation event. So angels were created first. They're the older. We're the younger. Yet it says the older shall serve the younger. We get to judge the angels. Now that older shall serve the younger, I don't know precisely how that relates to good angels, to the non-rebellious angels, though it does seem like, because a lot of this has to do with what's called the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. So, and a lot of you, I assume, are probably already familiar with that, but in case you're not, look up Dr. Michael Heiser, Deuteronomy 32 worldview, and but I'll do a brief run through. In Deuteronomy 32, if you get a good translation of it, it says how God divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of God, according to the angels. It originally was the angels' job to take care of these nations, basically. And this happened at the Tower of Babel event. So Tower of Babel, nations get scattered abroad because, all over the earth, because they were trying to enter into heaven. And so God says, well, fine, you want to serve angels and not me, then go ahead. And God put these angels in charge of these other nations. But these angels either at the time or became corrupt. And they rebelled against God, and they started having humans serve them. That's why we have so many different religions and false gods around the world. So these abusive false gods, they basically abused humans. They used humans for their own worship and their own elevation. So it goes back to that story. So there's been this strife between angels and man. So these are the two peoples, that one shall be stronger than but the older shall serve the younger. So the idea is that we now as human beings, because these angels are not allowed to, since the time of Jesus annihilated all of that, and he said, you can come to me now. Nobody has to serve these false gods. You come to me and serve me. And he basically kicked these false gods off of their thrones. So now we're invited to be part of what's called the Divine Council, which, again, if you follow Dr. Michael Heiser, then you know what the Divine Council is about. It's God's council, where he invites members of his creation to convene with him, to fellowship with him, make decisions with him. And the angels used to have that place. But the rebellious ones, they lost it. So now the younger, us, we're invited into that place. And we're going to see that in the story of the birthright coming up soon. But it says in verse 24, when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. So why twins? Well, it's signifying that there's a similarity here, because while we're different than the angels, that we're still God's creation. While one is of heaven, one is of earth, two nations, you could say, two kingdoms. We're still made by the same creator. We still have a similarity, almost like twins. But again, you can't take it too literally, because there are clear differences. But it's not like we're so different that it's just the similarities are more twin-like than they would be anything else. Okay, so the first came out red. All his body was like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau. And all I'm because there's a lot we could say about that, but all I'm going to say about that here is just that there's clearly a difference in appearance here. Just like with angels. Now, I'm not saying that angels are all red and hairy, but what I'm saying is that with angels, there is a clear difference in appearance to us. Now, sometimes they can appear just like men, right? But the difference the difference is in their capabilities. Some of them do look very different. We read about the seraphim. We read about cherubim with like 6 wings covering their feet and everything. Some of them do look different. Some of them look just like men, but they're still different. And I think that that's what this is communicating. While we're of the same creator, just like Jacob and Esau are of Isaac, there's a clear difference here. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Jacob means like supplanter or usurper, and that's usually seen as like a bad thing. But as we're going to read with this framework through this lens, it's not necessarily bad. It's just a description of what is. Because what the angels lost in their birthright, the fallen angels lost, we're given. And so this is again why you can't take it quite too literally. But there are times where where clearly Jacob is a picture of Christ. There are times where he's a picture of just generally mankind. There's times where he's a picture of Christians. So, we'll get into it, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. All right, so they're born. Now, when the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in the tents. And I think this just kind of speaks of the nature, the difference in nature. Again, when I say that this is an allegory for something, I'm not saying this story is only allegory. Like this, I believe this did happen literally. There was a real Esau, there was a real Jacob, but we can look at their lives and kind of put it in this framework of angels and humans. And when you think about fallen angels, I would say, a skilled hunter, like a roaring lion, seeking whom he might devour. I think that that's a pretty apt description of, Satan and fallen angels and things like that. And then while we, as Bible believing Christians, we're dwelling quietly in our tents. And sometimes, tents or houses can be like metaphors for like the covering of Christ's blood. That could be something there. So Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Okay, so if those pictures remain, and again, it's going to weave in and out. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. But God still loves the angels, right? He didn't hate the angels. Now, ate of his game, what would that be? What would be the angels' game? I don't exactly know. Rebekah loved Jacob, so that's like the world. The world now loves fallen mankind, right? If the world loves you, then that's like a problem because they hated Jesus. And that's kind of how we know if we're being rejected by the world, in a sense, if Rebekah does not love us, then we're being accepted by spiritually. We're closer in line with Jesus, which is a good thing. So that's kind of a test we can give ourselves. All right, now here's the birthright part, and this is talked about in Hebrews 12:16. This is interesting because it talks about sexual immorality in Hebrews 12:16, that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. And actually, maybe it's a good idea to take a look at this in context. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it may become defiled, that no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. For you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no chance to repent, though he sought it with tears. Sounds a lot like the fallen angels, but sexual immorality is mentioned specifically here. So let's think of let's think of what this story about Esau selling his birthright, and let's think of what the angels did with sexual immorality, if Esau is a picture of these fallen angels. So once Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. And Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So what did the fallen angels give up their birthright for? Because their birthright was the divine counsel. The fallen angels, all angels, they're well, I don't know if it was every single one of them, but their birthright was the divine counsel. But the divine counsel became corrupt. Obviously not God, but the angels became corrupt. They despised their birthright. So what happens? And this is where I think that maybe Jacob is a picture of Jesus here, and maybe it's kind of moved from just generally mankind to Jesus, because some would say, well, Jacob tricked Esau into selling his birthright. I don't think it was a trick. I think Esau realized he was weaker than he why did he come in starving? It's because he's been out forever. He probably stayed out too long, and he must have kept denying his own his own hunger and his own weakness. He kept denying it to the point of death, and he was like, all right, finally I give up. Some kind of stubborn people would do something like that, think that they're stronger than what they really are. Well, that's what happened with the angels. And so Jacob didn't trick Esau. Esau got himself in this situation. So Jacob said, okay, well, I want your birthright then. Well, what did Jesus do on the cross? Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection on the cross, and then him sending the apostles out to the other nations to tell the nations, look, you don't have to serve these false gods anymore. Their birthright is done and over with. They've sold their birthright. I think if you were to say that Jacob tricked Esau, did Jesus trick Satan? In a way, because Satan didn't know that putting Jesus on the cross like that, inspiring the Pharisees and the Romans to put Jesus on the cross, Satan didn't know that the result of that was gonna mean they've totally lost their birthright, even though they lost it a long time ago. But now that we get elevated to that point, we have salvation in Jesus Christ. We get to be with the Lord in eternity. And Scripture even says that had they known that, they never would have crucified him. So, in a way, you could say that, Satan was tricked, but Satan was the one that rebelled. These angels, they were the one that rebelled to begin with. Just like Esau here, he thought that he was stronger than what he was. The angels rebelled because, why would they rebel? Because they thought that they were stronger, better than God. Satan thinks that. They think that God's a liar. So Esau was denying his own weakness, just like the angels did when they left heaven. They're denying their own weakness, and they fall down here and then realize, oh man, we really messed up. And they started to hate their own birthright. They hate the divine counsel idea. They started to hate it. They left their original habitation, like Jude and First or Second Peter talk about. So we have a parallel there. So let's continue. Now there was a famine in the land besides the former famine that was in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Gerar in Abimelech, king of the Philistines, and the Lord answered him and said, do not go down to Egypt, dwell in the land of which I shall tell you, sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you, for to you and your offspring I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. I'll multiply your offspring of the stars of heaven, and give you the offspring of these lands, and in your offspring all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. So this is talking about Jesus and the gospel spreading out, of course, and through that offspring, through the Jewish people, because Jesus was born into the Jewish people, and the original church was Jewish. This spread out to the Gentile nations, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, my laws. So then we get some stuff about Isaac and Abimelech. Let's skip ahead to, because there's a lot here. Man, I'm wondering if this is actually a good point to break for members only. Yeah, actually, let's do that. There's a lot more that we're going to talk about, because I really want to get into when Jacob wrestled with the angel and how that really shows this picture. But for that, you're going to have to go be a member. We're running low on time for the free version of this episode. So if you want to get the rest of this Peck Report, head on over to dailyrenegade.com. Again, it is only $10 a month or $100 a year. And I suggest the $100 a year if you can afford it, because you do get 2 months for free, so it is cheaper for you in the long run, and then you don't have to worry about it for a whole other year. So, members, hang on the line. We got more to talk about. Everybody else, thank you so much. Take care, and God bless.